Hello guys, this is Panzermeister36 and today's video is going to be a little bit of a discussion about a common question I get on the channel. So just the other day I was watching this new video by Clayton at Workbench Hobbies where he was discussing and demonstrating black basing versus pre-shading and also some post-shading in there as well. And that reminded me of a question I get all the time, and that is people asking in the comments why I bother painting the entire thing in red primer if I'm just going to paint over it again in the base color. And that's a very good question. Sometimes I don't explain in the video because I try not to make the videos super long and wordy. I just try to get to the point and explain kind of what I'm doing in the moment, but we can do a little bit of color theory today and talk about that. So the common question is, why do I either prime the model in red primer with something like this, or sometimes I will prime the model in black and then paint it with like a red primer acrylic and then paint over with my normal acrylics. And people get confused by that because I understand it does seem like wasted effort. But I find it actually has an effect on my model, and there's three main reasons why I might do that. So the first and the main reason why I might want to do that red base is that it's essentially underpainting and it provides some warmth to the finish. This is mostly relevant to lighter and warmer colors, for example, something like this tropical camouflage, or maybe this usual German yellow with maybe tricolor camouflage on top. For something that's like Panzer Gray or olive drab, not really as relevant. You would probably go with a black for the base on those. I really learned this on a model I painted a long time ago on the channel here. It was a Stroke 3. I painted it with the Tamiya Gray surface primer. Then I painted it with the yellow camouflage and the green camo. And the model was just super dead and boring. There was no liveliness to that camouflage pattern, I guess you would say. And I was really not happy with that model in the end. But for example, on this one here, this Panzer 3, I painted it with the red primer to begin with, paint the camouflage on top, and it has a much more, like I keep saying, like lively finish. I don't want to get into too much art theory today, but when people are painting like actual paintings, sometimes they'll do like a gold yellow intense base color and then paint on top of that because there's a few spots where it'll creep through, and it also provides saturation that has an effect on the final colors on top of that in the end. The second reason why I might want to do that red primer base color is not super relevant to my techniques anymore, and that is if you want to do hairspray chipping for the base color chipping. What I mean by that is if you look at this model here, you can see the chipping effects are like a red primer color showing through. And I did that by painting it first with a red primer color. Then you apply the hairspray, which provides a weak barrier essentially. On top of that, I then airbrush the base color yellow. And then I can go in with a wet paintbrush. The water on the wet brush will soak through that yellow and encounter the hairspray, dissolve it, and you end up with a very realistic looking chipping pattern. So in that case, you basically need to apply whatever color you want to reveal through chipping underneath. And in that case, this is red primer. Now, I don't really do much of this red primer chipping for the base color anymore because I find that it's hard to maintain a reasonable level of chipping. That Stug 3 I showed you before in this Tiger 1, I think are good examples where I maintained a faint level of chipping, but it's very easy to get out of hand and start having way too much chipping effects. You can see a little bit of like wear along the edge of the roof there where it bends down. Another example would be under this C-hook stowage bracket there. And nowadays I'll do brush apply chipping for that. So in that case, this technique is not super relevant towards the necessity for the red base, but it's always an option for you if you want to do hairspray chipping for the base color. And now the final example as to why I might want to do that red primer base color instead of black or something else is that that's how it was done in real life on German armor, which is what I paint most of the time. You can find historical photographs, color photographs, where you can see that, first of all, the vehicles were primed in red, and then things like the rear surfaces of road wheels, the areas of the lower hull that are basically covered by the suspension were left in red primer because they're almost invisible in the end. And also if you're doing a vehicle that has, let's say, battle damage, something's been ripped off, in that case, you would have red primer exposed, and I've got bits of that here on the side where the filter's been removed and the toe points in the front have been ripped off this vehicle as well. And you can see the backs of my wheels are also red primer. That's how it was done in real life. So if you paint the model in red primer, you can leave these areas exposed, like I've done on this half track, for example, and it provides some very interesting final results because you can see a little bit of that in the end. It provides a little bit of that punchy contrast people like on their models, and it kind of ties it in with the rest of the red primer chipping you might have in the corners of spots where there's wear and tear. This is an example of the brush applied chipping I was talking about. We're not going to get into the German vehicles were deployed in red primer because that's not actually true, but there's plenty of photos of parts of German armor being in red primer. Like I said, the rear surfaces of wheels or areas that are otherwise not supposed to be visible. So for all those reasons, mainly the first and the third, but also the middle one too, like the hairspray chipping if that's your style. For all those reasons, the red primer base color is something I do on a lot of my models now that are a light color like German Dunkelgelb or the tropical camouflage patterns. If I'm doing something like a Panzer Grey vehicle, it's not really relevant. For example, on my Panhard I did this year, that was Panzer Grey, and Panzer Grey is a very cool color, and so I simply primed it with the black primer, and then I painted on that Panzer Grey with a gray color mixed in with a little bit of green to get that kind of like turquoise cool hint to the Panzer Grey. Now, as we discussed, if I want to get some of that warmth on the yellow color, you could use this. So maybe if you want to try the same thing on Panzer Grey, you could try like a dark blue or green base color and then put the gray on top of that and see how you end up with maybe a similar underpainting saturation effect there. That might be interesting. I've never tried that. I have seen people do what you might call quite kind of crazy things where if they're doing one of those 1930s era US aircraft where they have, all those yellow marking areas on the wings and the tail and so on, a lot of yellow, they will paint it in like pink or purple underneath because that helps you achieve your coverage easier than painting over like black because yellow doesn't have much opacity. But it also provides very subtle shifts in the color that add interest to the model. I mean, this is all kind of moot because in the end, if you paint your tank and you don't like the saturation, you can always just give it a filter with one of those bottled products like this that are like filter for Panzer Grey and it's blue, or filter for tropical camouflage and it's orange. That's also a way you can do it. And my end ramble here is basically saying there's a lot of different ways to skin a cat. There's no one right way to paint your model. There's countless techniques, different ways you can do different things, pre-shading, post-shading, black basing, red basing, I guess, I don't know. In the end, you're probably going to mix a bunch of techniques. They're all going to kind of interact, and there's plenty of different ways you can achieve a very nice weathered effect in your own style. There's no right way to do it. There's no wrong way to do it. I'm just sharing my thoughts on why I do this red base color on my German yellow models, because it's a very common question, and maybe it'll give you guys some ideas as to some punchy underpainting contrasts you can do on your own models. I guess you got some sneak peeks on some upcoming projects here. If you have any questions or comments, post them on below. I always read through them all. And if you like my work, you can support me for just $1 a month on Patreon because that really helps me buying paints and products to make these videos. As always, I'll see you guys next time. Until then, stay safe and happy modeling. See ya.